Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Craig Jeffery, your host today. I am joined once again by Lee-Ann Perkins, the passionate treasurer. We've spoken, I think this is our fifth podcast, over 5 years. Welcome to the podcast, Lee-Ann.
Thank you, Craig. I love coming back, and thank you for always giving me the opportunity to talk Treasury and specifically to talk it with you and your audience.
Our episode, which is part of the 2024 Outlook series, is how to be a successful treasurer in 2024. Now, this would apply if you're listening to this and it's well into 2024 and you're thinking about 2025, there's probably quite a bit that can be applied there as well. But this is how to be a successful treasurer in 2024. I thought before we get into a lot of the conversations that you've been having with people over the years, maybe you could just provide some context for, what are some of the challenges to being a successful treasurer? Maybe some of the background of the issues, if you could just lay some of that out for us.
What was top of mind this past year is going to be impactful over the next few years and items that treasurers are going to have to concentrate on. What we do today manifests itself tomorrow in either a good or a negative way. So we have to start thinking about the plans we're going to make and what we can control. We know there's always going to be uncontrollables that come our way, particularly in the field of treasury. But I've broken it down for the three things that were impactful to me this year that I think are going to continue into the next year and the upcoming years after that. So I have three areas: the economic landscape, the banks and their agendas. What's really important is staffing needs. To give some background, with the economic landscape, it really feels like this year, and as we plan for next year, there are so many things that are out of our control. The economy has been, as we all know, unpredictable, and working in the treasury finance world, in some ways it feels as unexplainable. It's hard to really know how to manage all of these things that are coming at us. And I think treasurers in 2024 are going to once again focus on navigating complex and potentially volatile economic landscapes here at home and abroad. There also comes a slew of changes in regulatory compliance with the banks and different governments. We also have to continue to manage technology, cybersecurity risks. They're increasing in scale and complexity. And then all of that, culminates in how we align our financial strategies with the broader organizational goals. From my experiences and talking with others around me, we're going to have to start thinking about areas that we may not have focused on as much this year and in the past. Top of mind for me is sustainability and ESG considerations. And then the one that I find really fascinating and exciting for our world is AI and its use in companies. I've always worked in global companies, and from my perspective, we have to manage a lot of unknowns, a lot of stresses and pressures that weren't expected. And this past year has been a lot of those combined. We've already had two major wars abroad. We are all facing rising inflation, rising interest rates, and then we've had these other issues domestically, such as union strikes, which obviously impact unemployment. We've had these housing anomalies. We've had the usual political challenges. And now we're also facing, yet again, a potential government shutdown, additional political divides. The rating agencies are changing in the US. So I think for us as treasurers, all of those are not just bullet points in a financial report that we read every day. They are the realities that shape our daily professional lives. So that's the economic landscape and background. And this past year, treasurers have been particularly impacted by the banks as our major partners. And the banks have not made it easy for us in the past few years. And I say that partly in jest. I know that our banks are some of our most important partners, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship. But banks have had their own struggles, and they face liquidity issues, they face funding issues, they face regulatory issues, and they also struggle to get the information from the companies that they need to set up bank accounts or pass compliance, just as much as we on the Treasury side feel bogged down by these administrative burdens of compliance needs and requests. I would have hoped in this day and age we live in that we would have gotten past all these difficult administrative tasks, but they really seem to become more burdensome for companies as we try to grow into different geographies, and it just becomes difficult to open accounts. On top of that, this year has been particularly difficult for the banks as they have had many different crises. And we all know by now about Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse issues. And then we also face, changing portfolios because of those. We've experienced that banks we've had relationships for many years, for whatever reason, have been told to move out of some markets or to change who they're providing services to. And when that happens and banks withdraw from your industry, it really adds additional burdens to companies. But we know these things happen, but it is definitely a difficulty for treasurers. And I think as the economy struggles globally and abroad, we're going to face more of these challenges. And we don't want in our companies to be left without the banks and partners that we need. So it would be great if we could come to a global resolution of how to make these things work out for both sides.
Yeah, Lee-Ann, your comments about access to capital is particularly challenging for maybe not the largest organizations, but downstream, and that's having a broader impact. You had a few things to say about staff as well for the context.
Yes, so this one is top of mind. It's becoming more challenging in this, what we're calling now post-COVID era. We're seeing from the research, but I think we're also feeling it in our companies that interpersonal connectedness is at an all-time low. And there are seismic shifts in the way we have to do our work in this new environment. We're still grappling, and even at AFP this year, we had presentations on remote versus hybrid versus in-office challenges. We're still talking about that. We're talking about now, how do we attract the best talent? How do we retain them, most importantly? And then how do we train them? And how do we empower our employees for success? And I was interested to learn that this is the first time now we have 4 generations in the workforce. So we have the boomers, the Gen X, the millennials, and the Gen Z. And this is taking a really unique approach as we manage such a diverse workforce. And if you think about it, with that great generational gap, we have so many needs in terms of skills, of what employees are valuing, what their needs are. And what's funny to me is the way we communicate. I'm Gen X, so I'm used to business writing, and I'm used to presentations that are of a business level, and I'm used to podcasts and presentations. But now we're having communications on WhatsApp media. We're having it with emojis or GIFs or whatever else is coming at us. So we have to work together in this business environment to all collaborate to meet the end goal. So it really can be tiring stuff. On top of what we're trying to accomplish on the technical side, we have this, different challenge on the staffing side. But, we can't fight it. Things change, generations change, and in our teams and our leaders just have to work out how to manage it and how to get the best out of all our employees. And I think it just comes down to training. It comes down to training your management, your leaders, and your employees to know how we best work together and collaborate. And so those are the 3 areas of concern for me: was the economy, the banks, and the staffing. And this, foundational planning it's not new. It's stresses that we face every year as we plan for our companies. But it just seems to me like the risks we're dealing with now are different in this post-COVID area. They just present themselves in different formats. As we prepare for next year, it's just about ensuring that we anticipate change. We acknowledge that we live in an uncertain world that is full of disruption.
Yeah, headwinds, crosswinds, sometimes tailwinds, and fluctuating, right? It's not always a storm. It's not always calm. It's kind of they're changing. You've had, as the passionate treasurer, and we've had the dialogue over multiple years, but you've had a ongoing dialogue with many people in finance. What in particular are some of the things that you've learned from your conversations with treasury people, finance people of late?
You know by now how much I love talking about treasury as a career. I'm such an advocate for this function. And I just love to help people through their treasury careers or just their careers in general. These type of conversations just became more frequent during COVID because I realized that there were so many people coming to me and asking for advice and craving guidance on their careers and their development. And also at the same time, how do they manage the changing workforce that they're in? And COVID was a tough time for many people in many ways, and it impacted us all in one way or another. But, I heard from a lot of people from different stages of their careers, how are they going to manage these interpersonal connectedness? How do they manage their growth? And, I did get questions on functional or technical expertise, but most of the conversations were about career guidance. And I mentioned earlier, we have these 4 generations in the workforce now, and we all act differently and we all value different facets of work and career. But at the end of the day, I think everyone in the working world wants to add value and they want to be valuable. So those were a lot of very interesting conversations on how to help people in a very practical way to grow their careers, and some even just to start their careers. As I've been helped so much in my career over the past 20 years, with mentorship and coaching, I wanted to help people and to give back in this way. So that's really why I started talking to people about their finance careers in a more of a dialogue in a practical way. And some of the things that really came up was, and I think a lot of these come up from COVID as well, is how do you set boundaries in your working life? And we all know in the first year or two of COVID, we felt like we worked longer hours, we worked harder, we had more demands set on us. So, one of the most important things I believe for all of us in the working force is to set your boundaries early on. You got to set those realistic deadlines, and you got to allow your team and your management to know that you have boundaries in your life as well. You're going to work hard at work, you're going to put everything into it, but at the same time, you also need rest and you also need a life. And I think the way you manage those additional resources is to embrace technology. And we have technology out there, and we should all be curious on how we can use it to do our jobs better and to do our jobs faster. You also need to set time in your calendar for thinking time. And one of my mentors gave me this great advice. And she said, if you don't put that time in your calendar when you need alone time, you need time to concentrate and to think, it's going to get run over by other meetings during the day. So put that time in your calendar for thinking, for exercise, for lunch, and even for vacations. We're all allowed to take vacations, believe it or not. The one thing that came up from the younger generation that I saw a lot was multitasking. When I was growing up in my career, I got the impression that multitasking was a great skill, that you should all do it. You should be able to do 5 things at the same time and get your work done and just be, go, go, go. But now we're seeing maybe it's not such a great skill, and research is showing that if you don't concentrate on one thing specifically, you're probably not going to get the most out of your time. The newer generation who grew up with, cell phones and the internet and everything coming at them from social media at the same time, I think multitasking and being distracted is what's a struggle for them in the workforce. So it's been interesting to talk to different generations on the things that are the most difficult for them, just in, how they get their jobs done.
I think, one of those things when you're talking about that, you're basically saying something that I would think is that there's no such thing as multitasking. There's distraction. But if you're working on multiple things, it can be a skill if you can switch and focus. You might have to switch and focus on different things quickly, but you have to focus. If you're just poking 6 things along, there is no focus and there's no value. Thanks for mentioning that. We think we can multitask, but we can't. We can learn to switch quickly maybe, but the focus is a superpower, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then, specifically in Treasury, what we talk about in careers is what interests you. And I still feel like, and I can't believe I've been in Treasury for 20 years and we're still trying to get people to understand what Treasury departments are and the value that we bring. So that's why I'm such a huge advocate for the Treasury function. And I'm so glad we have people like you and your podcast and your huge network that are still trying to get the word out about the importance and the ability that treasurers have in a company to help a company meet its goals. And, we're so much more than cash management, which I think that's what we're still stuck in many ways. Is that's what people think we do. We manage the cash and we have a love for all things banking, which we do. But, we're also visionaries who can use our strategic and operational experiences to help their company. So I say all that because there's so many facets of Treasury that I didn't know when I first came into Treasury. I only learned about this probably 12, 15 years into my career, that there is 5 specific areas of Treasury. It depends on what your interests are as to what you want to do with your Treasury career. Some people are very good at a specific area and they want to concentrate on one area. And others, like myself, like to be more of a deep generalist, like to have an understanding of all areas of Treasury so that I can figure out how best to use my skills for my company. And those 5 areas I'll just quickly touch on is liquidity management, it's operational management, it's capital markets. I think that's the fun one. When you go out and raise funds in the external markets, you do IPOs, bonds, things like that. There's financial management, which is more of the budgeting and investing side. And then there's risk management, which is coming into its own and it's becoming more important in companies in various areas. And we spoke earlier today about, just the financial risks, the interest rate risks and the access to capital. So that's a very specialist area as well. So I like to tell people, especially if they're new in their careers, that you should try to look for a company that can provide some sort of rotational training so you can see the different areas of Treasury that different companies have and to figure out where it is you want to be and what's going to make your job interesting to you and how you're going to make Treasury a career.
Lee-Ann, thanks for your comments on the value of Treasury and the fact that so many organizations or senior leaders don't understand the value. What's a general approach that you recommend for managing what's done, areas to focus on, tying things into the corporate goals, right?
A treasurer's main job is to safeguard the company's financial assets, to control those associated risks, to protect return on financial assets, and ensure funding for a company. So that, at the end of the day, is what we have to accomplish in our goals to help meet the company's goal of survival and thriving. And, there's many things that a Treasury professional does during the day, and a lot of it depends, too, on the size of your company. I have found that most companies, when they're more mature in their growth as a company, they have a Treasury department. Newer companies don't typically have a need, sometimes an understanding of why you need a Treasury department. So there's an overlap between, sometimes people in accounting or finance just doing the banking. But in a truly mature company, you get to to bring in treasury departments that can do so much more than just cash management, as I mentioned earlier. So generally, the things that we have to do to make sure the company is compliant with their monthly reporting, their quarterly reporting, depending on what type of company they are. But we just have to manage the day-to-day as well. And those are things like just general daily cash management, ensuring we're helping accounting to close the books on time and accurately. We have a lot of payments that we make. It's not just making the payment, ensuring that the vendor receives the funds, or on the AR side that we as the customer receive the funds, but it's also the process of protecting and securing all of those payments. And this, in my experience, has been something that we focus on a lot more during the day. We have to have heightened security and sensitivity to the payment arena. And we're not just dealing with checks anymore, thank goodness. We are dealing with sophisticated ways of payments. These are electronic payments, so along with that comes cybersecurity concerns. And as leaders of our companies, have to make sure we have the procedures in place and we have the repetitive training for our employees to make sure they know what best practices are for payments. And I think one we forget to do a lot is training for disasters. And there are many examples of companies that have either been hit with cybersecurity issues or actually have fallen for them, and there's been an actual breach and a loss of funds. So training for those disasters is something we need to start doing in our companies on a more frequent basis. And then we have to do the usual segregation of duties and have 4 eyes on all payments. Then I think also another benefit of Treasury is how collaborative we are as a department, that we can interact with IT and legal and all those other departments where they also have a heightened sensitivity to fraud and cybersecurity and breaches. And I think we work really well with those departments to help us as a company significantly reduce the risk of these threat actors that are coming into our financial landscape. There is also the general approach to what we do is ensuring we have good fraud training, like I said, but also things like, upskilling yourself in Excel. We all use Excel for 90 or more % of our daily work. We all know from when we started with Excel, it was just a different platform to what it is now. The things that you can use Excel for are really helpful and useful in a treasury department. So it's advancing skills in that area. And perhaps even things like financial statement understanding and reporting, because all of that impacts the Treasury Department in one way or another. And then there's also the, skilling yourself with understanding what FP&A does and what accounting does, because these departments all align with our function as we try to do our daily work. There's 2 other areas, what I spoke about earlier, ESG and keeping current on technology. So on the ESG side, it's maybe not so well used and thought about in companies in the US, but it's very far advanced in Europe. And for global companies, we have to be looking at and understanding sustainable investing, how companies run their buildings, how they work on reducing waste. And the thing that's the most important to me is ethical governance. In my opinion, anyone who works on a treasury team has to be beyond reproach when it comes to being ethical. We are working with somebody else's money. We're working with personal information. We have to be trustworthy and trusted at all times. So to me, that's just a general skill that a treasury person has to have. And then the keeping current on technology. I mentioned we use Excel for everything, but technical skills in Treasury are crucial. So even if we do have a Treasury workstation, we still have some format or output that's Excel-based. We have a lot of financial software that we work with and partner with fintech company softwares as well. So I think we have to familiarize ourselves with these current technologies that we're working on, with the current information that we're provided. And then there's also areas, depending on where you work, but there's areas such as, cash flow forecasting, hedging strategies, financial modeling. Just, if you stay updated with these latest technologies, I think you'll find an enjoyable way to do your daily work that can keep the company meeting its goals, and just understanding that the treasury landscape is constantly evolving. So these general skills have to be done and have to be known, but there's more to it that we can provide as a treasury team. Just one more update quickly on the current technologies, and I think you've heard me say this before, and this is my soapbox. We in treasury teams need to move away from manual work. We have to take the robot out of the human. Let technology do that repetitive manual work for us. In the treasury department, if we want to become more valuable to a company, we got to keep one eye on today, because that's how we get our daily operations done. But we also have to have one eye on the future. These are the strategic growth areas that we have to focus on in our company. And this is where we can be so valuable. We can help with ways that are future-proofing our company with practical methods. We can use new technologies to get into different markets for global companies. And then we also want to stay up to date with what our competitors are doing. We have to have that competitive advantage and protect ourselves from the outside influences. So we need to see what's coming, what's going to be needed for our company, and then make sure we have the skills to do that if it's necessary.
Take the robot out of the person. If we talk more on that, it would be kind of like, how do you make sure automation is done by machines? And then how do we govern the robots and artificial intelligence? Those are some really good points, and I think each of those areas you mentioned we could certainly talk about at some length. Maybe shifting to some of the core skills in treasury. How to be a successful treasurer in 2024. It's going to be more than just a single podcast to figure those things out, but maybe you could talk about some of those skills too. So we've had the context and the guidance and wisdom of this overall approach.
So I think we have the core technical competency skills, and then we have the soft skills, which are over and above the technical competency skills, which I think we need in a treasury department. So we know that we have to keep the company running and close the books, and we have to do those operational aspects. We have to ensure we have efficiencies in our bank account management. We have to strengthen controls. So those are all existing areas that we know to do on a daily basis, and we've been trained on, and it's well understood in the treasury department. But then I think there's new technical skills that we have to learn that are coming at us, and depending on the company, sometimes you don't see these for a couple of years, but these are skills that we're seeing in the outside world and we're seeing in other companies that we need to gain for our own company. What's important for treasury leaders, though, is you can't lead something that you don't understand. And this is not going to allow you or your team to be successful. So these technical competencies we have to have, but we also have to have that curious nature to know what else is out there and how do we skill ourselves as leaders so we can help teach the other members of our teams. And this is where I'm seeing it, particularly, ESG, as I've spoken about. It's the way, we manage our companies on an environmental side, the sustainability, and I spoke about the governance too. And that's it's a very broad topic. There is a lot involved there. There is master's courses in ESG now. So these are areas that companies have to help train us, because it's not something we've been doing for the last 20 years. And then areas like digital currency. And that's, of course, not going to be in everybody's company, but it came at me 2 years ago, and I didn't know anything about digital currency in a corporation and how to implement it, how to ensure we had the compliance around it, how to ensure our auditors were okay with it, our accounting department knew what to do, and how did we transact in digital currency. And the only way I figured it out was to be curious about it, to go learn up on it, and to use my networks to help me. So I think those are skills that, as I did that project, I started learning or hearing from a lot of my network who suddenly had to do the same project and didn't know where to start. So that's another way that we can see these skills are going to be necessary in the future, because we're seeing them pop up in large companies, and smaller companies are just a subset of those large companies. So we know these skills need to be taught to us in treasury departments, because at some point or another, we're going to have to know how to do it. Like I alluded to earlier, we have artificial intelligence and machine learning. To me, this is a technical competency that we need to start understanding. It's not going away. It's only going to be there to help us do our jobs better. And it's something that we need in our treasury departments to understand what it is, the reasoning behind why we have to do it, and then how do we use it in treasury.
There's so much development. AI and machine learning have been around for a while. And there's now even generative AI, and the accessibility is extremely good now versus it was a little harder to put in play.
And it's such a big field, and it's, there is so much to it. And I was lucky enough to be in a company that was curious enough to start using it in daily tasks. And what I learned is that artificial intelligence is not new. It's something that was coined in the 1950s, I believe. What we all used to see and understand as artificial intelligence is now pedestrian to us. It's in our everyday lives, whether we know it or not. It's gotten so much better over time, as you just said, and it's now available to everybody. With the advent of ChatGPT, we all now are talking about AI and machine learning and how we can use it to better ourselves, to make our daily lives easier. And then now it's coming slowly into corporations as well. But just as a context for AI, it's just a computer software that mirrors the way humans think to perform complex tasks, things like analyzing, reasoning, and learning. And then machine learning is what I think we're seeing in our corporations is just a subset of AI, but it's using algorithms that's trained on various pieces of data to produce models that can then perform those complex tasks for us. Like I said, it's been used for a long time in areas like medicine is one area, the automotive industry. We all know Elon Musk has been working on that for a while. It's been used in the construction area, and it's just gotten better over the time to a point where we're even using it at home, personal digital assistants such as Siri, or just what we see in the movies, science fiction like Terminator. So it's, I think, becoming more understandable to the average person now as well. When I started learning more about machine learning, I see it now, how it's in our everyday lives. And it's things like, when you're texting, it's using predictive text. So it's helping to fill in what we are going to say on our cell phone in quick, short texts, or even in emails. I mean, you see it at work when you write an email, you start with a general prompt and it's pretty much done the rest of the sentence for you, including the spelling. So that's great. On the treasury side, where I found it to be most interesting is in the back office of credit card transactions. And that's where the systems that these credit card companies are using millions of data points to determine, when we swipe our credit card, if that transaction appears normal for our individual profile, or perhaps it's fraudulent and requires further human intervention to say whether it's a valid transaction or not. So, there's many use cases. It's very interesting, and I think we're seeing it in our daily lives. But then I got to thinking, when I was working on these projects, is why do we have to do it? Why do we have to have AI and its subset machine learning in our daily lives and in our working lives. Just outside of the area of it creating efficiencies for us and being fun to use in a creative way, I really think that it is of strategic importance to companies. It's allowing the companies we're working in to be agile. And in the times we're living in now, we have to be agile in the economic and global disruptive world we're living in. It's helping to reduce the cost of labor overheads. And what's really nice for us is it's helping to free us up as workers in our companies from all that repetitive and labor intensive tasks. So once again, taking the robot out of the human. It's also helping us keep an eye on competition. Maybe not so much only in our own field, but it's further reaching, like what are other countries doing? They already have these skills training in place. And I'm seeing as I research further that there's other companies, and a lot of them, where tech skills are taught at earlier ages. So these are things that are going to become a competitive advantage for countries and companies that implement this into their sphere of influence. And then for me particularly, I like to feel like we have to do it for the reasons of mastery. All employees want to be fulfilled. And like I said earlier, we want to be valuable to a company, and we also want to add value. For companies that don't provide these skills training or tools, I think you're doing a disservice not only to your company, but to your employees who are very curious or ambitious, and they want to chase their dreams. They want to do things better, and they want to use the technologies that are available for them. So I think this is part of just keeping your workforce curious, keeping them engaged, and giving them the tools that they need to master their profession. So, with this machine learning, there's a lot of use cases for it in Treasury. And we know that there's a lot of fintech companies out there that have machine learning in their tools available to us. So I've seen it used in investment research, in researching foreign exchange markets and the daily cash positioning, forecasting. And what I really like too is just quick updates to policies and procedures and desktop manuals and bank fee analysis. So I think they're great tools for productivity. But at the end of the day, we still need humans to review and understand the output. We gotta know that it's still garbage in, garbage out. So we're not going to necessarily lose our jobs from AI, but know that our jobs are going to change, and we have to have these skills to understand the output that these system tools are giving us.
One key area for being a successful treasurer is related to communication. And you had mentioned earlier how many organizations don't know about Treasury. People don't understand what Treasury is doing. This idea and necessity of communication is vital. Any thoughts on what to do to be successful in this next year in the area of communication? Communication
is a soft skill that is also needed in the Treasury Department to be successful. And these are things that I've learned and refined over the years. And I've labeled them into 3 S's. We have storytelling, which is basically, it encompasses effective communication. We have stakeholder management. And this is important to allow other teams to know the benefits of Treasury, because we interface and collaborate with various other teams. And then also steering our careers. This is vital. If you want a career in Treasury, you want to grow and to become the best you can be in Treasury, you've got to have those deliberate conversations about where you want to go and how you want to get there. And that takes being a goal-orientated person. On the aspect of storytelling, this is really important because we have to communicate with people outside of our own Treasury Department. Can be C-suites, external debt holders, equity holders, rating agencies. But in Treasury, we have to give people information in a way that's useful and valuable to them. It's important, as we've got these multi-generational workforce teammates, They may not all have been exposed to C-suites. They may be new in their careers when COVID started and didn't really get the chance to learn how to be an effective communicator and tell the story that's compelling. With Treasury, we talk about numbers a lot. And to be honest, it can be a bit dry and a tad boring. So we have to work on those practical ways that we can present information in a way that's understandable, it's useful, and it's compelling to the audience. And just one quick story, at AFP this year, I went to one of the best presentations I've ever seen, and it was on boardroom personalities. It was just talking about knowing yourself, the way you communicate, how you absorb information, and then knowing your audience. How do they want the presentation to be given to them? How do they learn? And how do they want to get the information? And I think you do yourself a real service if you sit down, take the time to learn your communication style and how you can relate to others. And it's things like using analogies, using visualization, graphical information. Make sure your information is focused and logical, and then be very engaging with questions. And I think these types of skills that you can learn can just put you just one step ahead of just being really good technically. You need to have a very comprehensive skill set to be a influential and great treasury professional.
Lee-Ann, I really like your 3 S's: storytelling, communicating with people outside the department, stakeholder management, helping them know the benefits of a treasury, and then steering their careers. I want to thank you so much for your time on this podcast. Any final thoughts, any final words for how to be a successful treasurer in 2024?
I mentioned that I went to that presentation on boardroom personalities, and the thing that stuck out to me the most, great storytelling often has an analogy related to it. So I'm gonna try this one on you. I've been trying to do that, and I've been learning a lot about and researching ESG. So I'm putting these two together. We all know that beekeeping is a central study for sustainability, and in the acronym ESG. So when it's done right, beekeeping enriches the local ecosystem for miles. And we also know that the queen bee is essential for the thriving and survival and growth of her hive. And her presence is mandatory because it ensures the continuity and productivity of the colony. So it got me thinking that managing a company's treasury department is really like the role of a queen in a beehive. Just as the queen is central to the thriving of her hive, cash flow is the queen of a business's financial ecosystem and holds a similar sway in the business world. Cash influences your investment decisions, your operational strategies, risk management, and determines the health and hopefully prosperity of your company. Just as the hive revolves around the queen, she orchestrates its activities for well-being. So should a business orchestrate its operations around cash flow. It has to ensure it has enough cash and it's able to strategically utilize the cash for the company's success and longevity. So in this analogy, the pivotal and central role of cash flow in a business is being compared to the influential and critical role of a queen in her hive. So it's emphasizing the indispensable importance of guiding and sustaining the business. So as Treasury manages the cash, we ensure the funding. It should go without saying that Treasury departments should be seen as essential, and we should all work to uplift the value and importance of Treasury in a company. So I'm going to leave you with this saying: no bees, no honey, no work, no money.
Yeah, so the honey is the money, and the queen builds the workers and expands the producers of it, and the warriors and the ones that pollinate the flowers all work together. Say that phrase one more time.
No bees, no honey, no work, no money.
All right.
Feels like we could make a song out of that.
I won't be doing any singing on this podcast, but Lee-Ann, thank you so much for all your comments today.
It was great. Thank you so much.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.